In the age before memory, the world was not born but burned into being. The gods forged continents from embers, and where their flames cooled, life began to crawl. From the ashes of creation rose mankind, fragile, fearful, yet hungry for the same fire that birthed the stars. They called it magic, and for 1,000 years they worshipped it. But fire does not love its worshippers. Once the sky was filled with towers of flame, citadels of the Magi who ruled as gods among mortals. They drew light from the heart of the earth, shaping storms, bending oceans, commanding death itself. Yet every spell left behind a scar, a wound upon the world that never healed. Forests withered, seas turned black, the wind carried whispers of things unmade. And so, the War of Flame began. No one remembers who cast the first spark. Only that the heavens caught fire, and for 7 years, the sun was never seen again. Empires turned to dust, mountains melted into rivers of glass. The Magi burned their own thrones, and the world screamed. When at last the fires died, nothing remained but silence and ash. The survivors named the new age the Age of Stillness. Magic was outlawed, its symbols buried, its books burned, its bearers hunted to extinction. Those who once shaped creation were now myths, demons in children's tales. And yet, fire cannot be killed. It only hides. Far in the east, beyond the plains of ruin, there lies a valley where the soil still glows faintly red at night. They call it the Ember Vale, a place where no bird sings and no shadow falls. There the old flame breathes, slow, patient, alive. And in that valley, on a night when even the moon refused to rise, a child was born. Her name would be forgotten by history, but the world would remember her scream. The midwives said the air itself grew hot when she drew her first breath. The fire in the hearth went silent, as if listening. Her eyes, black as cinders, flared for a moment with light, the same light that once crowned the Magi. They whispered a curse. Ashborn! A child born from the ashes of the old world. A spark that should never have survived. The priests declared her existence blasphemy. The Church of the Still Flame sent riders before dawn, men in gray cloaks, faces covered in ash, carrying iron brands to mark the cursed. But when they reached the hut, the child was gone. Only scorched earth remained. They hunted for years, yet she vanished into legend, until one day the fires began again. Villages burned in the night, though no one saw who lit them. Witnesses spoke of a figure walking through the flames unharmed, her eyes reflecting the inferno. The Ashborn had returned, but she was no longer a child. She wandered the ruins of the old world, empty kingdoms swallowed by sand, temples half buried beneath stone and sorrow. And in every ruin, she felt something stirring. The earth trembled beneath her feet. The wind whispered her name. It was as if the world itself remembered her. In the north, the iron monks of the Still Flame gathered in secret. Their leader, High Prelate Morthen, declared a new crusade. The last fire must be extinguished, he said, or the Age of Ash will begin anew. And so they forged weapons from cold iron, sanctified in the blood of their own brothers, blades that drank fire. But prophecy had already spoken. In a forgotten scroll, older than any kingdom, it was written, "When the last spark awakens, the gods will weep. For from her breath shall come both ruin and rebirth." The Ashborn wandered toward her destiny, haunted by dreams of towers aflame and voices that weren't her own. Everywhere she went, life followed. Grass sprouting from burnt soil, rivers turning from black to red to blue. But so did death. Those who touched her too long began to smolder. The curse and the gift were one. She found herself drawn to the heart of the world, the place where the first fire had fallen. The mountains there were dead, the sky a gray wound. Beneath the dust, ancient stone doors waited, carved with runes that once bound gods. And when her hand touched them, they opened, not outward but inward, as if welcoming her home. The darkness inside was alive. It whispered in forgotten tongues. And from that abyss rose the voice of something older than the world. "Daughter of Ash," it said, You are the echo of our sin. The fire that ends the dark must first burn the light." Then the flame awoke, and the world began to burn once more. The mountain breathed. For centuries it had slept, a tomb of stone and silence, but now its heart throbbed with light. The girl, the Ashborn, stood before the cavern as molten veins crawled up the walls, tracing forgotten symbols. The air shimmered heavy with memory, and from the depths came the first sound the world had heard from its gods in 1,000 years, a heartbeat. She stepped forward, her shadow flickering like smoke. Each footfall left a print of glowing ember. The deeper she went, the louder the whispers became. Not voices, but remnants, fragments of a language once spoken by creation itself. Every word burned her skin. Every echo carried power. The flame inside her, that sleeping core, began to stir. She saw visions, a tower burning beneath a crimson sky, oceans of glass, faces of men who called themselves divine, and then a throne made of ash. On it sat no king, no god, and only fire. When she reached the end of the cavern, she found it, a sphere suspended in the air, pulsing softly. Not light, not heat, life. The first flame, the breath of the gods, the origin of all creation. It had survived the war, and now it recognized her. She reached out. Her hand trembled. The moment her skin met the flame, the mountain screamed. A shockwave erupted, red, gold, and black, sweeping across the land. Birds fell from the sky, rivers boiled. The world woke. Far away in the citadel of the still flame, the high prelate Morthen collapsed mid-prayer. The sacred fire before him turned black. The priest screamed. The ashes in the urns began to move, forming symbols in the air, the mark of the Ashborn. He knew then what the scriptures had promised. The end of their peace, the return of the true fire. In the valley below the mountain, the earth split. Out of it poured creatures of ember and shadow, the Emberborn, souls of the old magi twisted by their own magic. Their eyes glowed with ancient hunger, their forms shifting like smoke. They had waited for her, their queen, their curse, their final chance at rebirth. She did not speak to them. She only lifted her hand and they knelt, not out of worship but recognition. For she was both their savior and their doom. The next night, the stars themselves dimmed. From the western deserts came riders of the iron monks, their armor engraved with runes of unlight, their blades forged to devour flame. They rode without rest, guided by Morthen's visions. He had seen her in the fire, her eyes black as death, her hair a crown of smoke. The prophecy had said, "When the flame takes flesh, the sky shall bleed." The monks found the valley at dawn. What they saw was not of this world. The mountain glowed from within. The air trembled with heat and whispers. And on the ash-covered ground stood the Ashborn, surrounded by beings that should not exist. They charged. Iron met flame. The first battle of the New Age began. The Emberborn fell like burning snow, their bodies dissolving into sparks, but for each one slain, 2 more rose. The monks' iron burned red, then white, then melted. Still they fought, their prayers turning into screams. At the heart of the storm stood the girl, her eyes closed, her arms raised. Flame coiled around her like serpents. She did not fight. She became the fire. When she opened her eyes, the valley vanished in light. The mountain exploded, and silence returned. For 3 days the sky rained ash. The iron monks were gone. The Emberborn disappeared into the earth, and the Ashborn herself, nowhere to be found. But across the shattered kingdoms, people began to dream. They dreamed of her, walking through fire, whispering forgotten names. Wherever those dreams came, the dead awoke. Not as monsters, but as memories. And the living began to remember things they had never lived. The past was breaking through the present. Time itself was burning. Far north, beyond the frozen cliffs of Arath, a man watched the sky burn. His name was Kale. Once a scholar, now a fugitive, he carried a map drawn in blood. The only map that showed the ash paths, ley lines of ancient flame that circled the world. He knew the signs. He had read the prophecy in its original tongue, and he knew what the return of the fire meant. When the Ashborn rises, the gods will not return. They will be reborn. He set out toward the south, toward the mountains, toward her. Not to worship, not to kill, but to warn. Because there was something even older than the gods, buried beneath the ash. Something the first Magi tried to destroy and failed. Something that whispered still, through her blood. And as Kale rode beneath a dying sky, the world began to change once more. Rivers reversed, stars flickered. And deep beneath the molten heart of the mountains, something opened its eyes. The true fire had awoken, and it was hungry. The wind no longer carried life. It carried dust, fine, white, endless. Where once green fields had spread, now lay plains of bone and glass. The world was unraveling, thread by thread, memory by memory. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, Kale rode alone. The air was heavy with whispers, as if the ground itself remembered what it used to be. He had not seen another living soul in 12 days. Only shadows, tall, still, and human-shaped, that stood where light should have been. He didn't look at them anymore. Looking gave them faces. His horse faltered, hooves cracking the fragile crust of ash. Kyle dismounted, pressing his hand to the map tied across his chest. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The lines of fire inked in ancient blood glowed beneath his fingers. They were moving. The world's veins were shifting toward one point, the mountain that had burned. He knew she was there. He could feel her like heat through stone. When night came, the stars did not appear. Only one light burned in the sky, crimson, faint, distant. It pulsed in rhythm with his own heart. He whispered to the dark, "You've woken her too soon." Far beneath the earth, the Ashborn dreamed. Her body lay within the hollow of the dead mountain, cradled by black stone that still glowed from the inside. Around her, fragments of glass drifted, echoes of the world she had shattered. In her dream, she walked through fire that did not burn. Voices called to her, familiar, ancient, terrible. "Daughter of the first flame, bearer of the gods' regret, you are the end of their silence." She saw the faces of the Magi, eyes hollow, mouths open in eternal scream. They reached for her, not in anger, but in desperation. Finish what we could not. Then she saw the truth. The gods had never died in the war of flame. They had been bound, each imprisoned within the fire of the earth, their divinity broken into fragments called souls. Those fragments had become the Magi, and when the Magi destroyed themselves, their essence scattered into the air, the water, the blood. Humanity was the graveyard of gods. The Ashborn awoke. Her breath filled the cavern with heat. The stone beneath her cracked. For a moment she remembered her name, not the one given at birth, but the one whispered by fire, Sarai. She rose, barefoot, her eyes reflecting the glow of the molten walls. The fire obeyed her now. It pulsed with her heartbeat, moved with her thoughts. But it wasn't hers. It belonged to something inside her, something ancient that had chosen her as vessel. When Kyle reached the mountain, he found the valley unrecognizable. The once barren land now breathed with color and decay, flowers of red flame blooming in circles of glass. Every step he took melted the frost that clung to the ground. The air was alive, humming, waiting. He entered the mountain through a wound in the rock. Inside, the heat was unbearable, yet he felt no pain. He followed the whispers, the pulse, until he saw her, standing before a pool of liquid fire, her silhouette outlined in gold and shadow. The Ashborn. Her voice, when it came, was not human. "You've carried the map for too long, Kale." He froze. "How do you know my name?" She turned. Her eyes, not black anymore, but molten amber, looked through him. "Because you drew the map in your own blood." He stared at her, horror dawning. He pulled the parchment from his chest. The ink was pulsing faster now, the lines writhing like veins. Then he understood. The map didn't lead to the fire. It was the fire. The blood used to draw it, his, had once belonged to the Magi. He was their echo, just as she was their heir. He fell to his knees. "I came to warn you," he said, voice breaking. "If you wake what sleeps beneath, the world will—" She stepped closer. "Burn, it already is." The chamber trembled. Flames curled around her feet. The molten pool began to rise, forming shapes, faces, hands, wings, the ghosts of gods imprisoned in the core. Kale tried to stand, but the heat forced him down. His skin blistered. "Sarai," he whispered, "you are not them, you're human." For a heartbeat, her expression flickered. Sorrow, confusion, pain. Then the fire within her spoke. "Humanity is the cage. We are the flame." The ghosts screamed. The pool erupted into a pillar of light, piercing the roof of the world. The mountain split. Across continents, volcanoes awoke. The sky turned red. Kale shielded his eyes. "Sarai, listen to me. You are not their weapon." But she was gone. The voice that answered was not hers. The gods returned through ash, and with that, the fire consumed the heavens. For 7 nights, the world burned again. Cities became rivers of glass. Oceans boiled away. And in the center of it all, beneath the broken mountain, the Ashborn stood surrounded by living flame, the reborn gods rising from the ashes of mankind. But even as they emerged, she began to change. The human inside her, the soul that was Sarai, refused to vanish. She felt everything the gods felt, the hunger, the rage, the longing for freedom. And yet she saw their truth. They were not creators anymore. They were memory, trapped in their own fire, desperate to feel alive. She realized then what the Magi had tried to do long ago. They hadn't sought power. They had tried to end it. The true curse of fire was not destruction. It was eternity. She fell to her knees, her scream shaking the molten air. And as her tears touched the ground, the fire recoiled. For the first time since the dawn of the world, the flame knew fear. The earth had forgotten how to breathe. The sky, once filled with flame, now hung in silence, cracked like glass. The gods had returned, but the world was dying. What remained of oceans was vapor. What remained of cities was shadow. And at the heart of it all stood Sarai, the Ashborn, trembling before the fire she had unleashed. The reborn gods towered above her, their bodies woven from molten light and smoke. They had no faces, only the suggestion of form, echoes of the shapes they once took when the world was young. Their voices were not heard, but felt, vibrating through her bones. "We gave you our flame. You were to awaken us, not defy us." Sarai's hair whipped around her, glowing faintly in the infernal wind. Her skin shimmered with heat, her veins burning like rivers of magma. She raised her head, meeting the abyssal radiance of her makers. "I didn't wake you," she said softly. "You never slept." The gods' laughter rolled across the sky, the sound of storms breaking mountains. "You think yourself free? You are the shell of our desire." And yet, somewhere deep within her, another voice spoke, quieter, older, human. "No, you are more than their fire." She staggered backward, clutching her chest. Kale's voice echoed in her mind, his last words before the flames swallowed him. "You are not their weapon." The memory seared her. The god's fire raged inside her heart, demanding obedience. Visions struck her. Cities reborn in light, endless worship, the world remade in perfection. But beneath it all, she saw only one thing, the same cycle. Creation, war, ash. She screamed, her voice splitting the air. The flames around her trembled. The gods paused. And in that instant, Sarai reached into herself, into the core of the divine fire that chained her soul, and began to tear. Pain beyond pain. The light pouring from her body was no longer gold, but white, pure, blinding, devouring. The gods roared. "Stop, child of dust. Without us, the world cannot exist." She fell to her knees, blood turning to light, voice cracking. Then let it end. The mountain began to collapse. The fire spiraled upward, reaching beyond the clouds. Every creature, human, beast, spirit, felt the pulse of her defiance. For one heartbeat, all the fires of the world burned as one. Then came silence. The gods convulsed. Their forms unraveled, collapsing inward, pulled into the light emanating from her chest. They screamed not in rage, but in understanding. "You are not our daughter. You are our death." Sarai stood, her body dissolving into flame. Her eyes reflected the entire sky, every star, every memory, every life. She whispered to the dying gods, "I am what you made me, but I choose what I become." And with that, she closed her eyes. The world imploded. Light swallowed everything. The mountains crumbled, the seas vanished, the sky shattered into 1,000 shards. But from that nothingness, a spark remained. Time lost meaning. There was no sound, no shadow, only stillness. Then a single ember drifted through the void, pulsing softly. Neither god nor mortal, neither fire nor ash. Inside that ember, something slept. Not power, not destruction. A memory. It remembered a world that once burned, a girl who defied the gods, a moment when the flame chose mercy over eternity. And from that memory, a new warmth began to grow. A new dawn rose, not bright, not golden, but gentle. Soft light spread across newborn lands. The rivers sang again. The mountains breathed. And in the wind, faint but clear, a voice lingered. The fire was never meant to rule, only to remember. Far beneath the roots of the world, in a cavern of quiet stone, a single flower bloomed, its petals glowing with ember light. As it opened, the air shimmered. A spark flickered above it, small, fragile, alive. And for the first time since the world began, the flame did not destroy. It created. Thus ended the age of ash. No gods, no magi, only echoes and the whisper of a new beginning. And somewhere, carried by the wind, a voice, her voice, spoke to the dawn. "If the fire returns, let it burn only to warm, and not to rule." The wind answered. The world breathed again. The last fire, and the first light.